The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to College Football Coast to Coast. The season is now over after our national championship game the other night on Monday night between the Georgia Bulldogs and the TCU Horned Frogs. Tyler is with me on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. Yes, guys, we're a little late with the episode. It's been kind of hectic, busy. If you guys didn't see, we did a watch party for the national championship game. It wasn't much of a watch party because of what we'll get into, and that being the game itself. Of course, it was played at SoFi Stadium in LA, well, in Inglewood, California. Let me get that right, not LA, even though all the LA teams, play in Inglewood. This game, Tyler, was very interesting. Very unexpected for some, unless you're a Georgia fan. But we'll open with the national championship game itself. Of course, it is brought to you by Fanatics. Of course, the Georgia Bulldogs do win 65-7 over the TCU Horned Frogs. And if you Georgia fans want to go out there and get your national championship gear, now is the time to do that. You guys can use the link in our show right there on your screen. Also, if you're watching the live, and go get your championship merch, because another year, you can either change the number on your shirt that you already have to 2023 instead of 2022, or you can go buy some new merch. I suggest you buy some new merch and come help us out over here on College Football Coast to Coast. Tyler, I'll get your thoughts first, on this game, and what you saw first from Georgia, how Georgia was able to move the ball and score, and of course, the ineffective offensive TCU and how they handled.
Yeah, like you mentioned, we had our national championship watch party, and we stuck it out even through the bad times and how boring it was, because I read an article actually today that this was the lowest rating, like TV ratings, that the national championship has gotten in quite some time. And the score you can see right there, 65-7. And like you mentioned, I'll start with Georgia. Just complete domination from start to finish. This team was supposedly doubted all season. You could hear all the players saying, all the people are saying that we went 7-5 and 6-6. I don't know if Kirby Smart just said that and lied to them, because I didn't see anybody say that at the start of the season. I know that they had that really question mark. They lost 15 guys, most on the defensive side. Lost Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean was really the top two guys. They lost some of their George Pickens was one of their top receivers, but really they were a top three team going into the season. They were ranked number 3. And if you remember, they had a couple of weeks at number one, and then they had to just put Tennessee at number one just of what Tennessee was doing, especially after that Alabama win. And then we see Georgia and Tennessee step up on the field, and Georgia flexes their muscles and they get the number one, and they don't really give up at all. So, I mean, Georgia was the number one team. They showed it from start to finish in this game. TCU did get the ball in this one. It was a quick 3-and-out, and then Georgia didn't take a much. Stetson Bennett, the first drive that they get, 21-yard rush by Bennett, and then the next drive was just killer for TCU. They got the ball. They weren't necessarily driving down the field, but they were starting to pick up some first downs. And then TCU fumbles the ball. And then all of a sudden, Georgia has great field position. Credit for TCU's defense. Georgia did get into the red zone, but they were able to hold them. So it gets it to 10-0. And then really the floodgates just start after that. We did have TCU did come back. They scored their lone touchdown. The play after that, Max Duggan did get a 2-yard rush. There was some hype if y'all missed it in the national championship watch party. These two bozos, Jacob and Chet, decided to do a live money line bet on TCU. It was a plus 575 bet. They just put in $5, so it's not like they really like lost a lot of money on that. But that was the closest that TCU got. Georgia, after that, we saw a couple of runs by Stetson Bennett. We saw another run by Stetson Bennett, but 6 total touchdowns by Bennett as he's going to be concluding his collegiate career. He is a 25-year-old quarterback. I mean, he's older than some of these quarterbacks that we're going to be seeing in the NFL playoffs in a couple of days. So I got to give credit to Georgia. I think that Georgia's defense really shut down TCU. There was a lot of hype around TCU, especially after that Michigan win. And I'm hearing a lot of people, I'm sure that we'll be talking about this. I think that TCU definitely deserved to be in the college football playoff. I just don't think that they will ever match with a team like Georgia or an Alabama or Ohio State. I know that they beat Michigan. Michigan now is probably saying to themselves, like, wow, that is embarrassing that we couldn't even beat this TCU team. But I think the fan base that really hurts from this is Ohio State because they played probably the best game against Georgia. They lost by 1, and they could be, if they beat them, and then they probably cruise to win against TCU. So never know. I bet that Ohio State fans are definitely asking themselves that question. But congratulations, Georgia. Back-to-back is a tough do. And either collegiate sports, professional sports is always hard to do. We haven't seen it since the 2011-2012 Alabama team. But Georgia's creating something special down there in Athens.
Yeah, they are. They're brewing something up there. Of course, we'll get later on to the effect of what Georgia brings to college football itself. But my thoughts on this game, I do agree with you, Tyler. So Georgia was able to score the ball very easily in this one, almost too easily. TCU's defense, I mentioned a lot, during the live broadcast, that TCU is going to have to come up with something other than that 3-3-5 because Georgia figured it out almost immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, they knew how to take advantage of the 3-3-5, that Sonny Dykes decided to throw out there. I think everybody knows already that TCU is an offensive team. They're in the Big 12, which is an offensive-minded, conference. So I see why, they are the way they are. The SEC and in Georgia themselves, pride themselves on defense. I mean, that's their strong suit. And they came up with a great defensive scheme to get to Max Duggins. I mean, they really had no problem with that. I was worried about that as far as TCU's offensive line went. I knew that Georgia's defensive line wouldn't make the same mistake twice in letting, somebody like CJ Stroud. He was able to stand back there and throw the ball all he wanted. And that's kind of how Georgia got into trouble. So there was a lot of pressure brought on Max Duggins. And I think Duggan did the best he could with what he had. I mean, that's, as much as you can really say about it. They don't have any way to do a 2 running back tandem system. They weren't really able to run the ball effectively in this one. A couple of decent runs, but other than that, really a lot of east-west passing, screen passes that I just didn't, you and I both looked at each other and kind of shook our head going, what are they doing? They need to move the ball north-south. They trailed this entire game, and it just wasn't there other than the big pass play for, what set it up to be a touchdown. I turnovers were a big problem for TCU. Max Duggan threw a couple of picks, and it just went. You had a fumble early on in the first half, and that's how Georgia. You held Georgia to a field goal there, but still, I mean, it's points that you can't give up to a team like that, especially points off of turnovers. That was my biggest thing. I think if we saw Georgia and Ohio State in a national championship, that game that we saw there would have been a better national championship game, or even the TCU and Michigan game. Those two games were fantastic. And we talked so much about how the semifinal games were really, really good, and was shaping up for a really, hard hitting national championship game. And that's not what we got, for the first time. I think, yeah, I don't see TCU being a factor any longer, especially looking into next season. But of course, before we get into who's going to be the factor, for the next season and who we think's going to be there, we'll get into the final AP rankings in our AP top 10 check-in. You guys can see on our screen if you are watching live, kind of our AP top 10 as we finish out the season. Of course, Georgia finishes at number 1 as your back-to-back national champion. Number 2, TCU finishes. They lose, but they don't move because it's the national championship game. 3 is Michigan, and 4 is Ohio State. Both of them stay there, obviously. Being in the playoff really doesn't cause you to move anywhere. You're going to kind of sit there regardless. Alabama stays at 5 after their big, huge Sugar Bowl win over K-State. 6, Tennessee takes the number 6 spot there after they blow out Clemson. All these games, that we've talked that we're going to talk. There's a lot of blowouts. I mean, in the top, 25. Not really in the top 10 for the rest of these teams. Number 7, Penn State, after their big Rose Bowl win in Pasadena for the Rose Bowl. Number 8 is Washington. Washington got their big win. Great for that program there, so they come in at number 8. Number 9, Tulane. Tulane wins the Cotton Bowl against USC, and they jump all the way up to number 9. It is fantastic to see them inside the top 10, which is crazy. But of course, their last second drive to win it really capped off their amazing season and the biggest FBS turnaround in the history of college football. So, and number 10, of course, is Utah. Utah loses that game to Penn State. Kind of a big loss to Penn State. I'm surprised to see Utah here at 10. That's my biggest question mark as far as that goes. I'm kind of curious of why they're there at 10 when there's a couple of other teams that could have been there. For me, I thought Florida State would have been a good team to go there at number 10. It just felt like there should have been a team that won a bowl game sitting there at the number 10 spot to round it out. But those are my thoughts on it, Tyler. Of course, looking at the entire encompassing it all, our top 25 with our risers and fallers, that is brought to you by Buffalo Bayou Brewing Company. If you guys want to go check out all of the great brews and views in downtown Houston, you guys can check that out over at Buffalo Bayou Brewing Company. That you can visit their website also and see what else they have to offer. They're always rolling out new stuff there in the brewery. So you guys can check that out at www.buffbrew.com. That is www.buffbrew.com. Tyler, I want to get your thoughts, of course, on the risers and fallers inside the top 25, and also your one team, inside the top 10 that you don't think belongs there, or, their seeding, is wrong.
Yeah, I'll go first. With the riser, I think that you could probably guess this team is in the top 10, and that is none other than the Tulane Green Wave, baby. Roll Wave. What a season it was. I keep mentioning going from 2-10 to a 12-2 season. I know that they had, like both of us weren't even on this team. We were both on Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF. That was their top 3 going into the preseason. Boy, we were wrong. If you want to go back to our preseason, predictions we have. It would definitely be a good listen now to see, how right and how wrong we were in that. But it's got to be Tulane for me. It's definitely going to be interesting to see the future of this Tulane program going into 2023, especially under the new American Athletic Conference. You'll be bringing in some of the Conference USA teams are going to be joining since you have UCF, Houston are going to be leaving for the Big 12, and then BYU will also be in the Big 12. But Tulane, I mean, no one really doubted. People were doubting this team more than anyone this season. No one really stood a chance. They were picked pretty much dead last in their American Athletic Conference Championship, but their offense really under Michael Pratt did a good job. Tyjae Spears had a big game against USC. We brought it up when we were talking about that game, over 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. You'll be losing him, but Pratt will be coming back. And then the defense, I think, it was a little rocky road of a start to begin this season, especially against some of these American Athletic Championship, in the American Athletic Conference Championship game, they won. But the first matchup against UCF, the Tulane's defense just really didn't get a stand a chance. I know they gave up 40 points to USC, but that's you're going up against Cale Williams and that offense. So that's a tough bet. So Tulane's my riser. My faller, to me, there's definitely a lot of teams that can be in this instance. I feel like a lot of teams were disappointing. Like we've all mentioned, we mentioned all the Big 12 teams. To me, it's got to be Texas falling 4 spots to number 25. Just so much hype, I feel like, is around this program. I'm just waiting for them to be their year. I think that next year in 2023, well, now this year in 2023, I keep saying next year, but we're in the year. But next season, I feel like with Quinn Ewers, he's going to be in the competition at least. I feel like they're going to give Arch Manning a chance to compete for the competition at the quarterback. But in my opinion, I think that Quinn Ewers will be your guy. You'll have to replace Bijan Robinson, one of the best running backs in all of college football, and then you're going to be losing some key guys on the defensive side. So Texas' defense, I think, is going to be as important as their offense. I think their offense is still going to be good. You're getting some weapons back in the receiver spot. I bet that they're going to get some guys in the transfer portal. They always do. But I think that their defense was really the main concern. You look at their losses. I know the Alabama loss, so that was the best that we have seen this Texas defense in a long time. But you look back at like the Texas Tech game, giving up 34 to them. Washington, they really didn't stand a chance in that one. So I think that Texas now looking into this season, the Big 12, TCU is going to be a question mark. I do think that you're getting 3 former Alabama 5-stars, so that's a good sign for you. But you're losing Duggan, you're losing your best receiver in Quentin Johnston, and then I think that with the new Big 12, it's definitely going to be a conference to watch. So I think that Texas, this could be the upcoming season where they make some noise.
Yeah, for me, my riser is going to be the team that played Texas in that bowl game there. My riser is Washington. I think the Huskies, going back, they finished the season really, really strong. They played well. I mean, really, out of their last 5 games, 3 of them were against teams that were ranked inside the top 25. That is counting the bowl game. So, they get a field goal win over Oregon State, who's a powerhouse that is going to have to be watched out for this next season. They go on the road and they beat Oregon, who was ranked at 6 at the time. Come back home, shellac Colorado, but Colorado's not going to be that same team anymore. You take care of Washington State on the road, easy. With 51, you put up 51 there after you just put up 54 at home against Colorado. And then you go over to the Alamo Bowl and you play against Texas, who's, arguably the biggest talk of the town when it comes to next season. But they take care of them with the touchdown win, 27-20. I just think that Washington has handled the second half of the season so well that it's hard to count them out for next season. But we'll talk a little bit more about the Pac-12. And you're losing 2 schools in a couple of years, but it might be the strongest conference coming up here really, really quickly when we look at next season, just based off of rankings and competitiveness within the conference itself. Chet chimed in and said Colorado got that prime time power. Yes, Chet. We'll see what Coach Prime can bring to Colorado for this next season. We'll talk a little bit more about that later this off season. But for my faller, I think my faller has to be Clemson. There was a lot more expectation coming from Clemson, especially going into this bowl game with the Orange Bowl. I just wanted them to put up some kind of fight, and there just wasn't at all. You don't have DJ anymore. I get that. But losing by 17 to Tennessee, who's playing with their backup quarterback, uh, is pretty bad. I mean, turnovers were really bad. You just saw the inexperience of Cade Klubnik, really with this Clemson offense. Defensively, Clemson couldn't hold Tennessee. Tennessee had a lot of big plays down the field that they were able to take advantage there. I just think Tennessee, the way uh, they were able to stay the course this season, even after the South Carolina nightmare, I there was still some hope there, and I thought, it's really going to be, the tail of the tape, whether they come back and continue, playing strong, or, they go into the rabbit hole and we don't see them till next season after that. But no, they came out and they played a fantastic game in that one. Just it's tough to see what's going to come in the future from Clemson. I'm really curious. It's going to be a lot of off-season work. I mean, they have a lot to do to come up, and if they want to compete for and be back, in the top 4 for next season for a national championship. So moving on to our kind of way
Yeah,
way
way
too
too
early.
early. We still got 236 days until kickoff of the next season.
So the way too early ESPN top 25 will give you kind of the top 10 as they sit as of right now, who ESPN thinks that should be there in the top 10 for next season. We'll give you our opinions on it soon after I run through it. Of course, at number 1 we have Georgia. They'll stay there. Ohio State jumps to number 2 with Michigan following at 3. Florida State jumps all the way up to number 4. Alabama stays right at 5. Penn State at 6. Moving down the list a little further is USC at number 7. LSU at 8. Oregon at 9. And Tennessee at 10. So in that list right there, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 teams in the SEC, 1, 2, 3 teams in the Big Ten, 2 Pac-12 teams, and an ACC team. Tyler, my question to you is, what stands out the most out of the top 10? And who could be that team to make, that Cinderella run, outside in the top 25? Because, Cinderella run would be a team that's, not considered in this list
Yeah.
when we think about it. So, who's your team for that as well?
Yeah, there's always a team that I look at in these way too early top 10 that's either too high or too low. Like we always have that one team that's highly ranked and then they fall out. I think that one team to me is USC. I just feel like the Pac-12 is going to be loaded this year. It's not like I'm saying that they're not going to be good or anything. I think that they're going to be, their offense is going to be good. Their defense is still in question mark. But I feel like Utah is going to be good as well. Cam Rising's coming back for his senior year. We've talked about Oregon State of what they're returning. I mean, they have DJU coming in, but he probably won't even get the job. It'll probably be Gulbertson being their starting quarterback. Their defense is also improved as well. You have Oregon right behind them. I think that Oregon is going to be better than USC. So I just feel like the Pac-12 is going to beat each other up. So to me, USC is going to be the team that's on this list that's going to fall out. We'll see what the real AP poll is, but we won't see that until August. But I think the team that I'm really looking at my eyes for is number 4, Florida State. I mean, this team is going to be absolutely loaded, and they're coming off of a 10-win season that really no one expected them. I think that a lot of people are going like, okay, if they get 8 wins, then that's a good season for Florida State. But we're all going to be watching that matchup. Florida State LSU is going to be easily a top 10 matchup, maybe a top 5 matchup, depending on if LSU jumps the likes of Alabama and Penn State in this early poll, I could easily see LSU be at number 6 heading in to the 2023 season. But Florida State, you're returning Jordan Travis, losing some of your wide receivers, but your defense is going to be the best defense in the ACC. And like I told you, right now, if we were doing our preseason show, Florida State would be my pick for the ACC. Wouldn't even be close to me. Clemson, I know you're running Cade Klubniak over there. I still have some question marks of what he can do whenever he faces his Florida State defense. That's definitely going to be a question mark. But I feel like even if Florida State loses to LSU, I think that's still a good loss. I think I think that Florida State, if you're really looking at the two teams, Florida State can really afford a loss in that game. LSU really can with the schedule that they have in the SEC. You still have to play Alabama, Florida, and the likes of that. So I think looking at Florida State's schedule outside of the LSU game, I think they can win every game. So I think that they could easily go 11-1, 12-0, and be in the playoff for the first time since the Jameis Winston days.
Yeah, it's very possible with Mike Norvell there. I mean, for me, the team that doesn't belong there in the top 10, for me, is probably going to be, get ready,
I'm ready.
Alabama.
Whoa. Okay.
I think Alabama isn't going to be there inside the top 10. I can see them sitting at 11, 12, somewhere in that range. Teams around them are getting really good. I'm not sure how their non-conference is going to play out next season. But of course it's going to be light work. I think Alabama should open the season against a team inside the top 10. It's always a good test, but that probably won't happen. Alabama's the biggest question mark for me in the SEC because of them losing Bryce Young. You lose your best defensive player, arguably, both of them to the NFL draft. Who's waiting, in the hallways of Alabama to take control of that offense? You saw Milroe for a little bit while Bryce Young was out, but I think that Alabama is a team that can be put on alert just by their play this season. People know that Alabama is a team that's vulnerable, even with their best players like Bryce Young and Will Anderson. So without those guys and a young receiving core, it's going to be very interesting to see how next season goes and what they really do, because Alabama might become very one-dimensional with the run here looking at next season, and it can be stopped very easily by a lot of these teams in the SEC. Chet chimed in and said, not even trying to be biased here, but I think the West is going to be run by LSU. We will see what happens, Chet. I'm not going to agree or disagree with your statement. We'll see what happens with that, because I don't think any of us know, especially after the season, what in the world's going to happen. Of course, it's all a prediction at the end of the day. So I see that being my team that doesn't belong in the top 10. As far as a team outside that can make a decent run, not that they're going to make a national championship run, but a decent run, for me is probably Duke. I know it's a little wacky, but I think Duke actually had a really good season this year. And I think they can build off of it. They have the right coaching in place. They've got a young, good bunch of guys, the fiery bunch that really want to go out there and play for their school, and for that organization. So I really think that it's a lot to look at in the ACC, because Florida State's kind of being pictured as that top team in the ACC now. So I think that Duke can honestly be that team to make some upsets within the ACC. They had some good wins in the ACC this year. I mean, they're only a 3-loss team at the end of the season, and they still miss out on the top 25, which is pretty wild. But the win against UCF, I mean, was a convincing win, and UCF is no slouch. I mean, they've been up and down all season, but it was a good team, and Duke handled that really well. They have a veteran quarterback back there that knows what he's doing. So I look for them to be my team on the rise coming up here next season.
Man, I like it. Before we get into Jet's comment, I'm just going through the rest of the top 25. At first, I wasn't going to say all of it, but I got to do it. There's like some teams that I'm definitely shocked that's in the top 25. So we'll go through the rest of it. So number 11 is Washington. Number 12 is TCU. I don't think that's really any concern. Number 13, Utah. I feel like that's a little bit low to me, especially with I know that they're losing Dalton Kincaid. That was one of their best tight ends. They're losing a couple of linebackers, Mohamed Diabate. I feel like that's going to be a team that's going to be reckoned with in the Pac-12. Notre Dame at 14. That's going to be an interesting one, especially with Sam Hartman joining that team. You do lose Michael Mayer to that team. Number 15 is Clemson. We'll see. I think this is kind of a question mark for the Clemson Tigers. I think that they can definitely run it through the ACC, but I feel like Florida State's going to be that team in their division. 16 is Texas. So we see Texas once again be highly ranked. We will see if they stay there for this season. Number 17 is Oregon State. So the Beavers are getting some love from ESPN. I think I agree with that. I think that the Pac-12, you're seeing it already. Those are 4 teams already. You had USC and Oregon in the top 10, and you're seeing Washington, Utah, and now Oregon State. So that's just saying that the Pac-12 is going to be absolutely loaded next year. So number 18 is Kansas State. That's definitely going to be an interesting team. I know you lose Deuce Vaughn, but you still got some key additions. Adrian Martinez will be back for your team. Will Howard will also be back as well. Number 19 is Tulane. So we'll see if the Green Wave can go back-to-back in the American. Number 20 is Ole Miss. That's our next SEC team we see. A lot of question marks with that team, but they're definitely young on both sides of the ball. They'll be getting Jackson Dart back. Number 21 is North Carolina. Drake May and the Tar Heels are still in the top 25. Number 22 is UTSA. I agree with that. I mean, what's the Conference USA going to be? I mean, teams are going to be going out the door. UTSA is probably be the only good team in there. Number 23 is a team that we're both high on is Texas Tech. I think that's going to be a team that to keep your eye on. This is my team to go on a TCU run. I know that they're going to be ranked in here, but I don't think they're going to be ranked. So Texas Tech for me is my team to make that TCU run. Not saying that they're going to make a national championship, but I'm just saying the Big 12 is going to be open and Texas Tech has the weapons on the offensive side. They got to fix up a little bit on the defense. I think they're going to be fine. 24 is James Madison. This will be their first year to actually win the Sun Belt Championship and compete for a title. And then number 25, I don't know why they're here, but Iowa. I guess that's just a pity vote, but that's the top 25. And then Chet's comment says, I say that because I think the other team starting quarterback is Arkansas. That's actually not true. The SEC West, you do have Alabama losing their quarterback. Arkansas, you're getting KJ Jefferson. Mississippi State is returning Will Rogers. Ole Miss will be returning Jackson Dart. And Auburn, they haven't picked up anybody in the transfer portal, which I was definitely surprised of. I thought that they would be going after either a Sam Hartman, maybe they go after Spencer Sanders, but right now they're still going with their freshman and Robbie Ashford. And then who's the other team? Oh, yeah, Texas A&M will probably go with Mac Johnson if I would have to bet.
All right, so that's looking at our way too early top 25 and our top 10 there. So a lot of teams with some question marks. My biggest one on that list is that them not showing enough love to Tulane, them being that far down the list for next season. They're not really losing anybody major, so it kind of makes me wonder they're not really looking at another quality season for them again this year. It's still a bowl, but nothing like what they did this season, which of course being in the top 10, looking at how they finished this season, for them to drop 10 spots is a long ways. So it really is interesting to see how them moving that far down the list. Getting into our second to last segment of the show, of course, is our news segment. If you guys go to the bottom of our link, it is brought to you by YETI. You guys can check that out over on the link below in our show. If you guys go over there and stock up on all your coolers, drinkware, and luggage for your durable, rugged trips. If you guys spend over $50 there at YETI, you guys can get free shipping with your order there. Of course, it's always nice for free shipping, especially when it's coming all the way across the company, so all the way across the country. Yeah, sorry, it's been a very long day. I've talked to a lot of companies today, but no, across the country. If you guys want to go check them out, they have all of those fun ones that that you guys can check out there. But moving into our news, Tyler, of course, first biggest thing on the docket for the news is Spencer Rattler will be returning to South Carolina for the Gamecocks for another year. So I think South Carolina is a team that we got to look out for again. As long as Spencer Rattler there is there, I think that South Carolina will be a problem in the SEC. So we will see how that fares. And of course, he knows the system well. Coming back for another year, I know Shane Beamer probably had a lot of influence on him coming back for that season and how successful the season was for them.
Yeah, definitely. And then, of course, the Wade comes at the right time. And of course, whenever we're talking about South Carolina, he jumps in. What's up, Wade? Yeah, this is huge news for the Gamecocks. And yeah, like Chet mentions, I mean, this was all-time video by him. It's just like, I'm not freaking leaving. It's like, I love that whenever quarterbacks and star players return. So I think this is a big get for South Carolina. You're losing your defensive end. He's going to the transfer portal. Marshawn Lloyd, their star running back, decided to go to the University of Southern California. So he decided to go to the fake USC, I'm guessing, since a lot of South Carolina fans like to call them the real USC. But I think Wade brings up a good point. Spencer Rattler and that Antoine Wells connection is definitely going to be huge. I think that the defense showed some spurts in the season, but I still have question marks for them. But the SEC East, I feel like Georgia, I know they're going to be losing a lot again, but they're obviously going to be the number one team. But I think number two is going to either come down between South Carolina and Tennessee. That's going to be a huge matchup whenever that is. South Carolina will obviously play Georgia on the road. But if you looked at Georgia's schedule recently in 2023, it's not that very hard. I feel like it's really easy. It's like a very cupcakes. You start off with UT Martin and Ball State. And then the SEC just really doesn't. I mean, their cross rival is Ole Miss, and they get them at home. So I think that Georgia will probably ease through their schedule and win the SEC East. But I feel like South Carolina can make some noise, the noise that Tennessee made last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's very possible with them returning their field general for another season. In other news, going away from his college career and going to the NFL draft after he declared his star defensive player, Jalen Carter, from the national champion Georgia Bulldogs. Yeah, I mean, back-to-back national championships, can't ask him for much more than that. He, I think, kind of knew that he was going to be pretty high on the list of guys if he was to declare for the draft. I mean, he's a very sought-after player, especially in the NFL. So we'll see where he goes. He's probably a first rounder, no doubt. It seems that him declaring is just what everybody was expecting, especially following a national championship.
Yeah, this was just an inevitable move. I mean, you won back-to-back national championships. What's there else to do in your collegiate career? If the Chicago Bears do keep their number one overall pick, I don't know if they will. Maybe you'll see a team like the Indianapolis Colts, a quarterback-needed team, try and get up into the number one overall pick. But if the Bears do stay to the number one pick, then Jalen Carter, I could definitely see them. The Bears need defense, and more defense. They do have their quarterback of the future with Justin Fields, so they don't really need another quarterback. So I think that Jalen Carter, if he goes off the board, is going to be number one overall pick if Chicago's there.
Yeah. So, and also, in other news, if we want to talk about, yeah, you could go for the 3-peat. Yes, Chet. That'd be very impressive if Georgia won 3 national championships in a row.
That would be, especially after, having that long drought of not winning a national title for like 20 years plus, and they win 3 straight. That would be insane.
That's enough. And then they'll go on a 40-year drought. But no, getting to our last player, as far as moves or stay, do they stay or go? Actually 2 more, I'm sorry. But one of them returning for his senior season.
One of our favorites.
Is Cam Rising. Mr. Mullet himself is returning to the Utes of Utah for his senior season after his injury and had to leave the game during the Rose Bowl for the second year in a row. He was not able to finish the Rose Bowl, but he's coming back to finish it for his senior season to see if he can lead Utah back to the to the college football playoff and see if they can be a factor next season. I'm sure Kyle Whittingham had a lot to do with why Cam Rising is returning for his senior season. If Cam Rising stays healthy, has a good enough season, I can see him being a sought-after quarterback midway for the NFL. For the NFL draft, being a mid-round pick. But yeah, I think this is big for Utah, especially to get him back, because that is your field general, and there is a big drop off from what we saw going in, with the Rose Bowl. I don't think their backup had any, thoughts that he would be playing in that game, and really they weren't ready for it. And you could tell that there's a lot of work needed on the back end, and a lot of teams have that work, and that's why you have springtime and all those training camps in order to get that all ironed out. But big news for Utah.
Yeah, big news indeed. It's always huge to get your veteran quarterback coming back for another year. I think their main goal is to get to the college football playoff. They've been close for the last several years. We've been high on Utah. I'm sure that going into next season, we're going to be high on Utah once again. Cam Rising has been our dude here on this show. I mean, we've given the Heisman hype. I think with all the quarterbacks leaving, with Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Stetson Bennett, Cam Rising could be one of the top quarterbacks on that Heisman Trophy list. I think he brings the intangibles. Not only can he throw the deep ball, but he can also run you over, because that's what he's built like. He's built like a tight end. So I think this is huge. Health-wise is always going to be key for Utah going into the next season. If Cam Rising can stay healthy, then I think the Utes can make some noise, not only in the Pac-12, but the national stage too.
Yeah, and then closing out with our news, last but not least, is the star running back from Michigan. Blake Corum is returning to Michigan after his season-ending injury. We never saw him return, towards the end of the season. So he will be returning and be Michigan's RB1 for next season for sure. I don't know if they know something that we don't. About what's going on at Michigan, or what's going to happen for next season. Of course, JJ McCarthy is returning. A lot of their receivers are returning. Michigan's not losing a whole heck of a lot, really. So they'll be returned, ready to go. We'll see how they fare for next season. But I think Michigan will be a team to watch out in the East, along with Penn State. I think Ohio State, you're going to see a little bit of a drop off, only because there's no more C.J. Stroud. They got a new guy that they're going to have to make sure that he's ready to go to play Ohio State football. And I'm sure Ryan Day will have him ready to do that. But I think it's going to take at least 1 year for Ohio State to get back into the swing of things. Of course, we saw that, with the change going to CJ Stroud, from your former quarterback with Justin Fields. I mean, there was a little bit of a spot there where, we saw, what's Ohio State going to do? Are they going to be any good, or what's going to happen? I think this is going to be a new year in the Big Ten, that we're going to see something that we don't normally see from the Big Ten East, at least. That's my thoughts on it. I don't know what your thoughts are, looking at Michigan as a whole, in their factor in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think that Michigan is going to have a good chance once again to get back to the college football playoff, depending on what their head football coach decides to do, whether that's stay at Michigan or leave for the big leagues. But Blake Corum coming back is definitely huge for this Michigan running game. Like you mentioned, they're not going to be losing a lot. Their young football team, they are losing their tight end, Shoemaker. He's going to the NFL draft. But pretty much you still have your receivers there. You'll have your 1-2 punch coming out of the backfield with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. And the defense will also be strong as well. Most of your guys that left was last season and heading into this season. So I think the Big Ten East is still going to be up for grabs. So I think that Michigan-Penn State game is definitely going to be huge. Penn State will have the advantage since it's in Happy Valley. That will probably be their whiteout game, I would have to assume. I mean, this is going to be a top 5 matchup, and winner goes to the Big Ten championship. So I think that Michigan is definitely going to be in for another good season. Hopefully this season they can actually win a playoff game and get to the national championship.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there in the Big Ten East, and if Michigan can get back to the national championship or the playoff scenario for another season. Moving on to our questions. Of course, our questions are brought to you by Piper Golf. If you guys want to head over there and get some balls to pipe your drives, you guys can head over to piper.golf/sportscramble10. guys can head over there and pick up your golf balls. They are tour quality golf balls for a non-tour price. You guys can head over there. They have golf balls for everybody from beginner all the way up to scratch golfers. So you guys can go check that out over at Piper Golf. Tyler, with our questions here, the first thing is you kind of hinted at it. Does Jim Harbaugh stay at Michigan, or does he leave for the big leagues to go to the NFL?
Yeah, I think that he ultimately stays at Michigan. I know that there's some allegations going around Michigan, but really there's no NFL jobs that Harbaugh would really be interested in. The Denver Broncos, I know you have Russell Wilson there, but that was a team that went 4-12 or 5-12 this year, actually, since they beat the Chargers in Week 18. Houston Texans is another job that's open, but we're seeing Houston as ultimate dumpster fire right now. So there's not really a lot of jobs that are really open in the NFL that would really entice Jim Harbaugh. It's not the situation that he'd be walking into with San Francisco with the pure talent that they have there. So I think that, he built Michigan into what it is right now. So I think that he comes back and he's going to really try his best. I think this is going to be ultimately his best team that he's had. I think that with, these are going to be some players that you have, especially at the quarterback position with J.J. McCarthy. He'll have a year of experience now, and you're getting Blake Corum back. So I think this is going to be his best team that he's ever had at Michigan. So I think he ultimately comes back, and I think that Michigan will be back in the Big Ten East race.
Yeah, my biggest thing is you brought up the allegations thing. If those allegations do end up standing, who knows what's going to happen with
Yeah.
Jim Harbaugh?
We could see Blake Corum leaving.
Yeah, you could see a lot of these guys flip, transfer out. There's a lot,
There's
on
a
the
lot of
line.
unknowns.
A lot of unknowns right now. If the allegations are true, if things stand where they are, I think Harbaugh has no choice. If he wants to continue his football career, he's going to have to go to the NFL. That's my thoughts on it. Of course, if they are, seen to be not true or false in any way, I think he does return to Michigan for another season. Why would you leave a very good program to go into full rebuild mode with a major NFL organization? Doesn't make any sense. The only thing would be for the money, and I'm sure Jim's making just as much money as Michigan, if not more, than he would be at the NFL. So it's one of those situations. He was unsuccessful in the first place in the NFL. And came back to college football. Him going back to the NFL would be an interesting move. But who knows? We've seen it happen a lot with guys go back and forth. It happens. So we could see something like that happen there with Jim Harbaugh, with him either going to the NFL or staying, pending these allegations that are forthcoming. But moving on to our last question here, of course, let's get some background on it. So, David Pollock is an analyst. Okay, we'll just call him an analyst for the purpose.
He's also a Georgia alum. He played linebacker at Georgia.
Right.
For more context to this.
I was trying to be nice.
Well,
because
I just wanted to say it.
Because him and Nick Saban, I don't know how friendly they are. But
they're not friendly now.
David Pollock brought up a point during the broadcast, there while they're there at the actual broadcast, desk there, when they have a break, or saying that Georgia basically runs college football now. Georgia is that team that runs college football now. And of course, Nick Saban was their guest there at the desk, and you kind of just saw Nick stare off into space, like, did he just say that kind of moment? And you saw like the twitch in Nick Saban's eye, and you were like, ooh, like that didn't sit well with him, kind of thing. Of course, he didn't agree with them because he's coaching the other team that's supposedly going, question mark, but be a powerhouse in college football, and they have been for a long time. So yeah, our question here is, Tyler, do you agree with David Pollock?
Man,
Saying that Georgia that they're running college football.
It's ballsy. I got even, and if anything, that's going to give fuel to the fire for Saban in the offseason. He's going to use that quote. Watch him put the quote on all of the Alabama facility of David Pollock saying that Georgia runs college football now. They're going to post it on everywhere in that building. I bet you damn sure that that's going to happen in that facility. But going to the question, I mean, we're seeing that it's the Alabama dynasty over and that Georgia's taking over college football. I'm going to say, yeah, I think that Georgia is slowly taking over college football. I mean, it's hard to say after they just won back-to-back national champions. You can't really say no until somebody knocks them off. And like I mentioned, their schedule next year doesn't really give me the no question. I think that next year they're going to be in the same position, going to the college football playoff, competing for an SEC championship, and potentially winning 3 in a row, which would be absurd. But I think that slowly Georgia is going to be the new face of the SEC. Not saying that Alabama is going to be done for, but I think that Alabama next year with a starting quarterback being gone, once you lose your quarterback, there's ultimately going to be a sudden drop off. I mean, you're going to have guys around them. You'll still have Jermaine Burton, Ja'Cory Brooks. Will be your top 2 receivers. But Jahmyr Gibbs ultimately will go on to the NFL draft, so that opens up a hole for them in the running back position. And then in the linebacker position, Will Anderson's gone. Eli Ricks, one of your top cornerbacks, is gone. Then your top safety is gone as well. But like Alabama and Georgia do, they don't rebuild, they reload. I'm not saying that Alabama is going to be in a rebuilding year, but I think that this could be another 10-2 season that Alabama has. I think that the SEC West is just going to be overall better next year. I think that LSU is ultimately going to be better. They have a couple of guys coming back on both sides of the ball. They're going to be entering some guys also are coming in from the transfer portal. I think that Ole Miss could be a team that we look at that could be a dark horse. Texas A&M, I know that we always talk about them in the preseason. They went from 5, they had a 5-7 season, but they have the talent. And then we'll see what Bobby Petrino does on offense coordinator. So I think that Georgia, to me, is now the king of the college football. Let me know if you agree. And also our comments, let me know if y'all think that Georgia runs the college football. To me, I think so.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that statement is correct. You know, I mentioned earlier saying, Alabama is my question mark team inside the top 10 only because of what they bring back and the lack
I think
of
this will be like the 2023 will be like the first year we have serious question marks about Alabama.
Yeah, and I think this is the time that, we have a lot of that, in college football, and there's really only one for sure thing, and that is Georgia's going to be good every single year. I you're got a quarterback that doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of experience, but what from he played the other night, he played pretty well. So I think, for Georgia to go out and get somebody, they have to be good in order for them to seek them out. Chet said that he thinks that Georgia has a real shot to repeat, but he's not going to lock them in just yet. And he said that's just based on the QB situation.
Hey, we're not getting our national title picks until we
Yeah.
get closer. Not doing
Yeah,
that.
it's just I mean, Chet is right. We haven't really seen this QB. We've seen him a little bit, there to close the game out, but nothing to really gauge anything off of. So next season will really be a big one to watch for Georgia and see if there's anybody that can take down the top dog. It's going to be very interesting to see who can do it and what team is capable of doing it and who can make a run. But of course, you guys are all have to stay tuned in for that for this off season and into the beginning of next season to see all of that play out. If you guys want to go see any more of our content, you guys can check us out at College Football Coast to Coast or CFB Coast to Coast. We are listed on there, as Monday afternoons. Normally, that could change depending on how the week goes, especially here in the off season. A lot of craziness going around, nothing concrete schedule right now. If you guys want to go check out any more of our all sports content, you guys can check that over out at Sports Scramble. We broadcast that on Sunday nights. You guys can check that out, of course, on YouTube and Apple Podcast, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcast. In Tyler's SEC talk,
We're in our off
Still-
season now. We won't have another
we're in
show
the-
until March Madness tips off.
Okay. Okay, so you guys will have to stick around for the basketball madness in March for SEC talk to get Tyler and Wade's thoughts on the SEC and how they are bouncing that basketball around. But of course, next week, guys, we have a little special something. We will talk about in our show next week the group of five as a whole next week. That's going to be our whole show. Will be the group of five. We talk so much about the Power Five, so we got to give some love to our group of five. And next week will be dedicated to the group of five and the offseason, looking at some teams and how they finished and where we see them going into next season. So you guys will have to stay tuned for that next week. Of course, you guys can check us out everywhere and give us some love there. Of course, we love to see you guys interact with the show. Stuff's been going great. Show's growing. We're having a great time doing it. So we stayed under an hour for our first show of the off season. So that's a plus. We're already off to a good start. So we will see you guys again next week for some more college football coast to coast.